I am Jim Howe, your duly elected presidential victim for the year. Thank you. Thank you. I've only got 10 minutes, and I'm going to do this in 10 minutes, but there's a couple of off-script items that I have to point to. And we've done this a few times already. We've done this in our words, in our emails, in our communications, but I once again cannot help but thank Deborah Southwell and Ron Rushing once again for an incredible job from March 2020 through this point in tackling all the issues that FEI faced for us during those months, which were obviously, we all had curveballs thrown at us for our businesses, which they had as well, but they had the additional curveballs of FEI, and they wrestled with it on a monthly basis. So Ron, I don't believe Deborah's here tonight, but thanks again. I want to point to our programs real quick today. If you were here for the PD session, I hope you were. I was not, I'm sorry to say. For some reason, my board wanted to have a quarterly meeting this afternoon. But I'm sure it was a great PD event, ESG, something we're all so happy to be able to embrace and add to our reporting requirements. Thank you for that group that presented that today. And thank you for being here this evening for our programs presentation, which is going to be presented by Matt Matheson here in just a little bit. We're going to have great PD and great program events throughout the year. Our sponsors should be, well, they're there on the right-hand side of the slide. Okay, I want to recognize tonight our chapter title sponsors, special events, strategic, and our meeting partners for this evening. First of all, renewing this year as our title sponsors, KPMG. Thank you so much for supporting this chapter and all that you do. Our strategic partners, Financial Additions and UMB Bank, for re-upping again this year. Thank you so much. Our special events partner, Holmes Murphy, who also re-upped this year in that same role. We thank you. And highlighting our meeting sponsors for this evening's meeting, Bank of Texas, Donovan and Watkins, and Moss Adams. Thank you. Now, please keep that up there. I'm going to go off script once more. Our sponsors are incredibly generous to this organization. They recognize that this network of professionals and this networking opportunity is great for their business as well as for the support that it brings to us as financial professionals. And without them and their generosity, we wouldn't have the great programs that we have throughout the year, our great dinners, our great meetings, our great socials. It is heavily endorsed by these very generous organizations. I'm not going to go through them all because there's too many. Thanks for the love for all of you. But what I would like to do is, if you are a sponsor, would you take a minute and let me embarrass you, and would you please just stand where you're sitting? Just stand up so we can see. Please take a second look, memorize these faces, reach out to them when you have a need. They bring a great many specialties and expertise to us, and they are ready and willing to help us as members. So please, if you're sitting next to one tonight and you haven't introduced yourself, please do so and get to know what that firm does and what they can offer you. That's it on that note. Is that good, Dana? Thank you. All right, membership announcements. We can flip it now. We do have prospective members here this evening. Thank you. Thanks for reaching out. Whether you just found us online or found us through a friend and sought to attend tonight, or if you were invited, we're glad you're here. We hope you enjoy this event and you will make the decision to become a member. In particular, I want to thank Kay Steelman of BGSF and Donovan Watkins who invited and brought a prospective member this evening. Thank you, Kay. And if you are a member that maybe transferred in from another chapter, if you're new to Dallas-Fort Worth, please make yourself known to someone at your table or to one of our board members, just so we can give you the proper welcome and make sure that you get acclimated and very familiar with all the many offerings that this chapter has to give you. We are extremely active and with many events that are impossible to attend all of them, but we want you to find the ones that are best for you. Membership directory launches, the preparation of that for this year is beginning right now, and you should have received an email to go out and check your profile online. Please go out and refresh that. Bryce, I know that yours is wrong. Fix it. There are probably others of you out there that have inaccurate profiles. Please refresh it so we know where you work. You might owe us money. We need to find you. And also refresh that picture. Mine is still within the 15-year time frame, which passes. But I've seen some of y'all's photos as well, and I'm sorry, Kendall, you're not that young. You are not that young. Refresh it. Get a headshot that you know. Don't be afraid of who you are. Talk to Jackie about that. Okay. Finally, upcoming chapter events. There we go. I knew there was a new one coming. We have a chapter career management networking meeting coming up with FEI on September 21. I know many of you have attended and participated in FEI events previously. The location has changed, and I believe a significant upgrade to where it's a very nice venue that Bank of Texas is allowing us to use. The location is over on Sherry Lane Place. And I think if you want to be a part of that network and are looking to connect with a few people, get to that meeting. I think you'll really enjoy the new setup. And Bob Walker will take care of you when you get there. Summer series, as you may know, our academic partners work with our special events education group to put on summer speaker series. We're down to our third and final, which is presented by UT Dallas on September 28th. It's a virtual event, so please look for that. It should also be online, and you can sign up and register for that. And I think it's a pretty interesting one about trading. So I'm looking forward to it. And thank you, David Springate, for working with the team to put that together. And then our next chapter meeting is on October 11th. Be right here, same time, same place. We look forward to you being here. Our SIG events, there are several coming up, and let me just say, we got a lot of stuff going on in September and October. All the SIGs meetings, I believe, are kicking off in those 2 months. This month, they're going to be virtual, but as of now, October, they're trying to go back to in-person. But the calendar is jam-packed, so thank you to Eric and Connexus and Mike Bates and the crew that works with all the sponsors that put those on. They're wonderful. Immediately in our immediate future is the private equity event on the 14th, energy on the 21st, and healthcare on the 30th. But there are several more right on the heels of those. So get out there and register. Go to all of them. Don't go home. Just do SIGs for the rest of the September and October. All righty. Sure, Kendall. But yeah. And that is a very, thank you, welcome. Thanks for being here. Right. Thank you, Kendall. That is your only interruption of the year. So you got that one out of the way. And that is a good reminder. If you recall, it may have been a while for some of you, but your CPE card is in the back of your name tag. That has to be filled out and turned in if you need CPE and want to get credit for it. And if you decide to sneak out early, we will shave that CPE credit. You're not getting the full hour and a half. And we'll see how that goes over. When you try to turn in 0.56 hours, it's just not going to add up right. Anyway, get those turned in before you walk out the door. Now, tonight's program is going to be introduced by the chairman of our programs committee, who is Bryce Moan. And just a little bit about Bryce. First of all, we thank him for stepping in and supporting the chapter and serving the chapter by being on this committee. He is currently the CFO of Arch Energy Partners. He is an experienced sage in the oil and gas business, having also served in senior finance roles with Teal Natural Resources and Dale Operating. So if you want to hear the good side of hydrocarbons, you just pull me and Bryce aside, and we will tell you about how much better it is than lithium mining for batteries. Anyway, enough of that for now. Bryce, would you please come introduce our program?
Thank you, Jim. First and foremost, welcome to everybody this evening. Thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedules. We look forward to an excellent year, and we are honored to be in the presence of an excellent program upcoming, delivered by Matt Matheson. Matt serves as the partner and CFO of Fifth Partners and also the CEO of Roots Management. Prior to Fifth and Roots, Matt served as the CFO of Imagination Unwired, as well as previous stops as VP of Capital Markets for Link Motion, as well as president of Wedge Partners from 2004 to 2013. He's had quite an extensive background in finance over many years at many different locations. He began his career as an institutional sales rep at Goldman Sachs. He received a bachelor's degree in finance from Brigham Young University Marriott School of Management. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Matt Matheson as our speaker.
Thank you, Bryce, and I'd like to thank everyone for the opportunity. I'm honored to be able to be here with you this evening. I heard from several of you that this was the first in-person chapter meeting since, I guess, COVID and all of the restrictions associated with that. So congratulations and cheers to being back. I'm cautiously optimistic. The last time that I heard that I was attending a kind of a first since COVID meeting, I was actually in Washington, D.C. just a couple months ago. And I was meeting with senior staff at Fannie Mae, and we were discussing the manufactured housing industry, and they were really excited to have us there, and they took us to dinner, and we were enjoying ourselves, and they told us that it was their first opportunity to actually go to a public restaurant and meet with clients and prospective clients in person. And we were all excited about that, and returned home, and it was no more than maybe 2 weeks later that we were supposed to have a follow-up meeting in July, and they said, you know what, we're shut down again. And I think they remain shut down. So I'm cautiously optimistic that won't be the case for you all here. We have a really something that's very important and near and dear to me topic to talk about. And before I dive into it, I wanted to do two things. One, I wanted to ask a question. And then secondly, I wanted to actually share with you a story about my experience around the September 11th tragedy. And I know over this past weekend, many of us may be a little bit fatigued at reading about or watching documentaries or information around that. But I have a purpose and a reason for sharing my own personal story. But before I get to that, just out of curiosity, by show of hands, who in this room has either personally lived in or knows a family member that lives in a trailer park? Okay, so a decent number. I'm going to come back to that point after I describe this story. So I was living in San Francisco. I was working at Goldman Sachs. This was in the early 2000s. I was still very young and immature. I'd spent a few years on the trading desk there. In San Francisco, we worked in, for those of you that are familiar with the city, the Bank of America building, which is the tallest building in the city. Yes, taller than the famous Transamerica building. And we were not on the top floors, but near the very top section of that building, and that's where we worked. Being on the West Coast, we would go into the office. Being a junior member of the trading team at that time, I would go into the office. I'd arrive at 3:30 in the morning every day to prepare for our morning call, which took place right at 4:15, which was 7:15 Eastern time. And so on the morning of September 11th, we actually had an analyst who covered the financial sector. She covered the banks for Goldman Sachs at that time. And she was in town, and one of our main duties on the trading floor was to arrange and set up different marketing meetings with institutional clients and mutual funds and hedge funds. And so that morning, we had a busy schedule for her planned. She was known to be very particular and somewhat fussy. And so our managing director at the time was very focused on ensuring that we had paid attention to all the little details of the day and that her trip would be satisfactory. And obviously, for some of you that may have worked on a trading floor before, they still have these systems but we referred to them as our hoot, which was a big black box, an intercom system that connected us to all the trading floors around the globe. And you could hear and speak over this hoot loudspeaker in real time. And when the first plane went through one of the towers, no one obviously knew what had happened, but we heard it. The office, the Goldman Sachs office in Lower Manhattan, walking distance was a number of blocks away, but from the crow's flight, it was literally like kitty corner. And we could hear it over the hoot system. And again, there wasn't really that big of a reaction to it because no one really knew what had happened. And as we know, it probably wasn't more than 10 minutes or so later until the TV station, CNBC, started to actually show the smoke pouring out of the building. And at that time, again, still people really didn't know. Maybe a small private plane had crashed. We didn't really know. And we kind of went on our day. And again, I remember the managing director at the time being very focused on, this marketing meeting for this analyst that covered the banks. By the time the second plane hit, I can vividly remember the sheer terror and yelling and screaming from that I could hear over the hoot system from New York, and there was a lot of chaos, as you can imagine. And I can remember to this day two very distinct things that happened next. One was the managing director at the time that was effectively my boss. Was just so focused on and concerned about this marketing trip and getting down to pick up the analyst at her hotel and have the right coffee and have the right materials all printed out. And again, this was all happening, and at that, as the second plane hit, we all knew that there was a major attack, and it was a major nightmare that was unfolding. And I can remember an associate who was only a couple years senior to me at the time. He stood up and he looked at the managing director, didn't say anything, he just looked at him, and then he looked back to the rest of us analysts at the time that were just like, what should we do? And he said, "Don't worry about anything, go home, be with your family, we'll send you a BlackBerry and let you know what to do next." And this managing director was like, stumbling and bumbling around, and we all literally immediately exited and went home. I share that story with you because at Fifth Partners, we believe that there is really only one true scarce resource right now. There's actually only one thing that is in short supply that's not effectively a commodity, and that's leadership. And we center our entire business around that belief that the most valuable resource are leaders. And we've built our entire business around trying to come up with tools and systems and resources focused around identifying, empowering, and effectively training leaders, and providing leaders with everything that they need to succeed. And we believe and define leaders not as the C-suite, right? Not as someone who's in charge of someone else or in something else, but of an individual that others proactively choose to follow. And I share that story because I think it's relevant as we actually talk about the manufactured housing industry and specifically Roots Management Group and what we're doing there. There's in the business, and we'll have an opportunity to unpack the business and maybe share with you some interesting insights into why it's a compelling and unique financial and investment opportunity. But more than anything else, right now, there's a number of societal and cultural and other crises that are unfolding before us. And I know many of us are familiar with them and deal with them in many different ways. But one of the most fundamental and primary elements that has been central to the American dream for many, many decades has been owning your own home and being able to provide both a location as well as an environment whereby which you can raise your family and do so with pride, do so with safety and security in mind, and do so in a way in which you can effectively pass on to your future generation, your children, right? Opportunities that are greater than the ones you had before. And we know today, it's not a surprise to many of us in this room, as we see the valuations of the homes we own continue to skyrocket. And while we might feel good about that, and it certainly has its benefits. The underlying consequences of not having a supply of housing options that people can afford is extreme. And it's not a cyclical matter. It's not something that we can say, hey, it's going to get better. This is a problem that is going to be with us for a long time and likely at an accelerating and an alarming pace. And so at Roots, and again, before Roots, I'll talk about the history of how Roots came to be just recently. But at Treehouse Communities, which has come under Roots Management's ownership, it was centered around the belief that trailer parks and all of the historical stigma associated with trailer parks was misguided, was misfounded, and fundamentally, at its core, manufactured housing communities could provide quality, wonderful, and safe opportunities for individuals to raise families, for workforces to find affordable means of living, and for retirees to find awesome and wonderful places to have second homes or retirement centers in great climates and good locations. And when you sum all of those things up, what happens is you create an environment in which leaders, true leaders, can shine. And in the manufactured housing segment, the leaders of the business, the single most important employee of the business, are those community managers. Those community managers that manage the individual community parks and locations, they literally are responsible for making sure that the residents that they're serving have awesome community environments, deal with any of their needs or issues associated with living conditions and other problems, as well as interfacing with the platform or the management co that's needed to bring necessary capital improvements and or other resources to make the dream, the American dream, of providing wonderful housing options so your kids can have a better opportunity forward. And that's why I'm so passionate about this subject. Yes, and again, we'll talk about the financial incentives and motivations around the business itself, but at the center of what we do, we really are helping to increase the availability of best-in-class housing options that people can actually afford. And there's no better solution. There's no better alternative. What you're going to see and notice in the coming weeks and months and years in front of us is you're going to see a complete 180-degree turn of about. You're going to see government officials. You're going to see politicians. You're going to see investors. You're going to see philanthropists. You're going to see everyone start to recognize the manufactured housing segment as just that. This can be and will be a key solution to an ongoing issue that's plaguing our society that we have to deal with. So with that, before I get into the presentation itself, let me just give you a little bit of color and background on the business. Back in 2017, Fifth Partners, following its annual credit committee meeting, made the purposeful decision to get very focused and to deploy its resources, its human capital, its intellectual capital, and its financial capital around the affordability theme. The real estate affordability in housing and solutions associated with that was one of the main takeaways. And as we move forward, by the way, the main founder of Fifth Partners is a gentleman that actually grew up in a trailer park in Arizona. He grew up and lived there with his siblings and his parents. And if you asked him talk about that today, he would say it was amazing and wonderful, and he never once considered it a trailer park. It was just home. And it was a home in which he was able to participate in school sports, ride around his bikes with his friends and his neighbors. And he had a wonderful childhood. And the memories of living in that and growing up in that trailer park are still very central to how he thinks about the world today. But we identified the affordability theme as a place to spend our time. And so towards the end of 2017, through family and friend connections, we actually were having a conversation with someone who's a neighbor of mine and a friend of Fifth Partners. And we were talking about our desire to get into the space, and we were going to spend money, and we were going to focus on acquiring some communities and helping to develop it. And ultimately, we wanted to build a platform around it. And it just so happened that coincidentally, or not, however you want to view it, that this friend is someone that was very involved in the real estate world. He had founded and built a very successful single-family rental business that's headquartered here. It's a public company, very well known. And he happened to have a family office that was established back in the mid-2000s, 2005 to be precise. And they had acquired and bought several manufactured housing communities. Now, truth be told, their family office didn't initially buy these trailer parks to manage them. They actually bought them to redevelop them, okay? And to put strip malls and retail and commercial space around them. And as they tried to actually rezone them and go through all the chaos and the nonsense to try and get all the approvals to actually redevelop these communities, what they found was the juice wasn't worth the squeeze. It was nearly impossible to do so, and they were actually pretty good businesses. And so they had these communities kind of running in the background, not really focused on it. But when we connected, he said, listen, if you're going to actually get into the manufactured housing space, let's do this together. And so in 2018, we partnered together and we formed Treehouse Communities. Since that time, Treehouse Communities was focused very much on the highest quality manufactured housing communities. In the industry, they're deemed as class 4, 4-star, and 5-star. In other real estate, vernacular, your class A quality type of manufactured housing communities, really focused in 3 states, California, Arizona, and Florida, which are the premier states where the highest quality manufactured housing communities reside. And we had great institutional backing and support. We partnered and did joint ventures with the largest and best real estate institutions in the world. And we were able to deploy a lot of the capital, and we were able to grow the platform from basically a couple of family-owned communities to over 100 communities and nearly 20,000 sites in a 2.5-year period. As we were doing this, middle of last year came around, and we looked ourselves in the mirror, and we realized that we were building a great platform. It was generating great financial returns, but we were kind of missing the mark on the vision and the goal around what we actually wanted to do. Because it was solely and singularly focused on institutional quality, communities and locations, it was amazing for the retirement and the 55+ age group. And we dabbled in a little bit of the family communities, but not much. But we weren't really, when kind of push came to shove and we were analyzing the situation, we weren't really increasing the availability of housing that people could afford. And we saw a huge gap in our operational presence and capabilities. And so we started looking at either building our own operational presence to focus more on the family and the workforce segment, as well as expanding outside of those classic sunshine states. In the manufactured housing industry, they're deemed tertiary markets. Really everything outside of California, Arizona, and Florida are deemed tertiary markets. Doesn't mean that they're bad markets. It doesn't mean that the population growth isn't there. It doesn't mean that they're not fantastically attractive from a financial return standpoint, but it's just they're deemed tertiary. And we knew we needed to increase both our operational focus and presence as well as our geographical expansion. And so we went through the process of exploring doing it on our own, or we also were able to find other platforms that were more focused in that. And that culminated in the merger between Treehouse Communities and Vineyards Management Group just a couple months ago. And Roots Management Group was born. It's the parent company that now owns wholly both Treehouse and Vineyards. And Vineyards was a company that did not focus on the institutional quality assets. They had initially set out to do an opportunity zone fund and then another evergreen fund, and they focused on the tertiary markets and in those family communities. They were buying communities that were 20, 30% occupied. They were focused on the trailer parks, and what they were doing in a short matter of months was putting in new homes, repaving roads, and really redeveloping these communities into wonderful places for families to live. And the results were amazing. And so the partnership is something that we're very proud of and very excited about. I'm going to pause because I do want to open up the presentation and show you and share with you some of the reasons why the space is so compelling. Some of the interesting kind of stats around the growth markets and what we're doing specifically. But before I do, I want to open the room up and make sure that you know that you can ask questions at any time. And again, if any of you have questions before I move on anything that I've said, I'd love to take questions and make this a little bit interactive as we move forward. Yes. Like that Roots owns right now? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, how many doors are there existing, and what are you thinking growth-wise as you go through the Roots future?
Yeah. Okay, so he asked how many doors or how many sites in this industry, they're called sites. How many sites are there existing, and what do we think the growth is going forward? Thank you for that question. It's a great point. It's one of the reasons why this asset class on its own is so compelling. You can't find another sector within real estate and very many other sectors in writ large that actually doesn't have supply growth. Okay, there's a few different reasons for that, but over the last 25 years, the number of manufactured housing communities hasn't changed. I mean, growth is less than 0.1% over a 25-year period. The real reason for that is, despite what every local politician says, when they say, look, we want to bring in we want to make housing affordable, and we want to bring jobs in, and we want to make sure that there's housing for those jobs, despite them saying that, when push comes to shove, when you go present an opportunity to develop a manufactured housing community, immediately the mic drops, everyone starts screaming, oh, we can't put trailer parks in our cities, okay? So there is a finite and fixed number. By the way, that's going to start to change, okay? I don't know if many of you saw the recent announcement by the White House, but the White House put out a press release. It was mostly centered around attacking big bad private equity investors, buying up a lot of single family homes and raising rents on those. And that was the main political purpose for this White House press release. But in there were some very important nuggets and telltale signs of what's to come. They specifically identified the manufactured housing segment, by the way, for the first time, as a means and an important way to increase the availability of affordable housing. They also indicated that they were going to start to increase the amount of capital and the lending by the various agencies to the space. And again, I'll just touch on this topic. I mentioned I was in Washington, D.C. You're going to see the agencies, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, actually start to lend to the manufactured housing space in ways that it's never done before. They've provided agency lending for the real estate. That's already existed. But what you're going to see, and we're actually a few weeks away from closing on the first of its kind facility with Fannie Mae, you're going to see them actually start to lend on the underlying carriages, the homes themselves. Again, they're not considered or haven't historically been considered homes because they've been movable. They're going to start to be considered homes. And the impact that that's going to have on residents and those looking to buy those homes is dramatic. Right now, the buyer of these homes doesn't qualify for mortgages. Many of them don't have credit scores. Many of them don't even have bank accounts. Okay? So you're going to see all of a sudden these buyers that have families, they have good jobs, in fact, right? And they have great pride and they can take care of themselves. You're going to see them get access to the type of interest rates and mortgage type products that the rest of us benefit from every day, all day, right? And so you're going to see some of those. So to answer your question specifically, there's been a fixed number of communities. The exact number is, I want to say it's around 20,000 total communities, total, okay? In terms of the number of sites, if you include, there's between manufactured housing and RV sites, there's probably not more than a couple million sites, period. So it's interesting and it's going to change. You're going to see development of these and you're going to see the mindset and the stigma change in very positive ways. Yes?
What you mean by manufactured housing? Is it kind of a sprinter van moving around? Is it, I don't, yeah, I'm sorry, but I've been
Sure.
in the same house for 33 years, so I don't know.
Yeah, so manufactured housing it's specifically defined as a structure that's built in a factory that can be moved from the factory to a location and fixated on a location. So it's movable, but it's not on wheels like you can drive it like an RV hitch. Okay, it's not that. Now, RVs typically do park, and there are RV sites typically in manufactured housing communities, but that's not what a manufactured home is. Yes?
So you have the homes that look like a house.
Mhm.
The ones that look like a trailer.
A single wide.
Yeah, single or double wide. But there's also ones that are manufactured. It looks like a house.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so are you talking about those, or are you talking about, what about tiny homes?
Yeah, great question. So just to repeat the question, she's asking me to define and describe the different types of homes more readily, because there are everything from single wides all the way up to 3-bedroom homes that are gorgeous and beautiful. And by the way, when they're fixed into a community, you would never know that it's a manufactured house or a trailer. You think that it's any other suburbia neighborhood. And there's beautiful ones, all the way down to there are single wide homes that truly have a hitch on the front that look like a trailer and everything in between. She also mentioned miniature homes or tiny homes. There's going to, again, I'm glad you brought that up, and we're actually participating in a number of different ways in which we can increase the manufacturing capacity of these types of homes, which will include things like tiny homes, Mobies, to things that like Elon Musk is living in, right, at SpaceX campus down in Austin, which I'm sure many of you have seen the articles, but if not, you haven't. He's living in a 350 square foot Moby. And by the way, according to him, I don't know if it's true, he doesn't own any other real estate outside of that Moby now. He's sold all the rest of his real estate. So you bring up a really interesting point. In addition to filling the need to increase the availability and supply of homes people can afford. The rising generation, the millennials, and those that are younger than the millennials, do not have the same taste, do not have the same style, do not have the same desire that many of us had or have now. And so again, you will see more developments associated with it, both out of necessity as well as out of preference. And some of the things that Roots is doing associated to the preference part, we are going to be partnering with very hip and cool designers and developers that are very interested in filling this need and filling this market and effectively creating a new starter home. What used to be, hey, the American dream, I go to college, I get an education, I get a job, right? I leave my parents' house, I go buy my first home, which is a smaller starter home in suburbia that I can afford. Well, now we know smaller starter homes in suburbia, people can't afford, right? Even those with extremely successful jobs, they can't yet afford them, okay? And so what you're going to see is that progression is going to start in some form of a manufactured house, okay? And there's going to be all sorts of it. In addition to, yes?
You have about 10 minutes left. Can
Yeah.
you show us some examples?
Sure, let's see if I have some.
Because I'm very interested in what you're saying. I want to
Yeah.
picture to it.
Yeah, I'll see if I have some pictures, some before and after pictures. I wanted to highlight this really quick, just to sum up the cost difference. Okay, on the right are apartments and single family home cost averages in these markets. On the left, you'll notice the cost of a 3-bedroom manufactured house on the Vineyards properties, on the Treehouse properties, and then the Roots average. It's dramatically more affordable. And the quality and the size is dramatically different. In apartments, right, people don't have their own space. They share walls with others. They can't pull their car up right to their front door. In the manufactured housing communities, they can. Let me just scroll and see if we can get to, I'm sorry that those pictures are so small, but yes.
I mean, location.
Yes.
These are comparable locations you were talking about earlier. I mean, that's everything.
Oh yeah, the pricing data was based on comparable geographies. Yes, comparable, exact comparable locations. Yes.
Considerations I have there is about the structural integrity of the manufacturing facilities, given the fact that we have this what's called climate change that addressing an awful lot of the manufacturing supplies that have basic larger problem when it comes to structural integrity, given any of the difficulties we're having with climate change. Address that.
Yeah, so he asked a question on, I think what you're asking is the nature of their mobility, does that make them less structurally firm in storms and hurricanes and things like that? Let me answer that two ways. Of course, if a tornado is going to go through a community that's a manufactured housing community versus brick and mortar type single family, of course the mobile smaller homes will fare worse, of course. But let me answer it slightly differently. There is a tremendous environmental benefit to the manufactured homes compared to the brick and mortar structural homes. The environmental footprint, the conservation of energy is drastically different, and the building quality that's being used right now it's much different. The vintage of these homes and the quality of these homes is vastly different from the trailers that made up the trailer parks of our memories, right? It's very different. Any other questions? Yes?
What's the life expectancy on a manufactured home?
30 to 40 years. We have in our communities, we have homes that are still vintage before 2000. You can remodel, you can re-side, you can put new windows on for very, very cost-effective levels, right? However, because the cost to buy a new home or replace a new home is so low, typically when a home gets outdated and someone moves out, we typically replace it with a new home. Yes?
So how do utility bills compare between the brick and mortar and
Obviously, smaller square footage, smaller footprint is going to lead to utility benefits to the owner or renter of a manufactured housing home.
say it was the same size, I mean, is it higher because it's not insulated as much?
In terms of size for size, there's two things. Of course, if it's the same size, same material, same everything, the cost is going to be equivalent, right? But typically, both in winter months and in hot months, it takes less energy to heat up a smaller room and a smaller location than it does with the equivalency of a home. Yes? In the first of its kind facility, which we're going to be closing on in a matter of weeks, it's 25 years. Yes?
What the independent geography, what the median price range for how does that compare to the
So again, it's the insurance question is going to depend on location, right? Storm location, flood location, all of those types of things. In terms of the cost, the average cost of a single bedroom unit is somewhere in the $50,000 to $60,000 range. To get up to a 3-bedroom, it's somewhere between $85,000 and $105,000 is the average. Yes? So yeah, I'll repeat the question. He's asking, how do you, with all the restrictions from local municipality restrictions, is that what your question is? How do you actually increase the availability of supply? Two answers to that. Within the existing footprint, the existing communities and the existing manufactured housing supply, it's largely owned by mom and pop owners that have never had the resources or the capital to actually invest in, to improve the communities and to put new homes there. And so many of the existing footprint have many unfilled and vacant sites, not because there's not demand, but because there's not homes. And the owners don't have the capital to put homes. And so when we go buy a community, we always, at the onset, in our underwriting, before we make a decision, we're always already factoring in both the capital improvements as well as the new homes placed to fill up the community. You couldn't see the before and after picture really well, but you can see this in Flint, Michigan. On the right-hand side, top right-hand side, was a community that we bought, and it's called Pasadena. There was 30% occupancy. Okay, and you can see kind of the pictures. The occupancy was that not because there weren't people there to rent these homes, because there weren't homes. And you can see after, we're at 94% occupancy 1 year later. From 30% to 94%. The difference is, yes, we made it prettier. Yes, we redid the roads. Yes, we improved the landscaping and trees. But the big difference is we put new homes there. And that's what we're going to do. These are rentals, but we do both. We sell to residents and we also rent them. In different markets, there's a different type of demand. But so increasing the supply, we're going to bring new homes to these communities that we buy within the existing footprint. The second part of your question is, I do expect governments and local leaders to start to understand that the stigmas associated with trailer parks or trailer trash is just that. It's an outdated and not relevant stigma. Going forward, these communities will provide an answer and a solution to a growing need. And when they're done correctly and when they're professionally managed, they can be amazing communities. Communities that people can feel proud of. Yes?
What percentage are stick frame, kind of traditional manufactured, repackaged kind of modular homes with shipping containers versus 3D? Is that part of your portfolio currently? And then second, where's your greatest market?
He asked, the question was, what in the current portfolio, what percentage is your traditional manufactured home that's made in a factory and then moved there versus a modular or tiny home or 3D generated printed home, things like that? The answer to that question is, right now, almost none in categories 2 and 3. That's in the future. Right now, we're bringing in your traditional manufactured homes.
Where's your best market?
And best margin for what?
For each out of those 3, which is you?
Well, as a landowner and as a real estate developer, making money on the sale of the home itself is not something we do. We usually don't make money on the sale of the home. We make money on owning the land.
So you bank on retail.
That's right. Are there any other questions? Okay. Let me just, again, I've touched on these 5 minutes. Okay, great. So today, and again, this is as of the end of July. Since then, we've added several other communities. We're about 211 communities and over 35,000 sites today. The 2 largest owners of these facilities are public companies, ELS and Sun, who collectively have over 100,000 sites. You're going to see Roots meaningfully focus and grow dramatically over this time frame. And we're excited to fill in this map because in each of these states and each of these locations, again, the one constant is there's not enough housing that people can afford. And again, we really believe that going forward and filling this need is going to be a meaningful pursuit. I will say, in conclusion, institutions have historically avoided investing in manufactured housing communities besides the 4-star and 5-star because of 4 main reasons. Number 1, the occupancy typically has been lower and they viewed that as an unstabilized real estate asset. We view that unstabilized real estate asset as having nothing to do with demand or market dynamics. We view that it's really based on the owners, the mom and pop owners, not having the capital or access to capital to put new homes. So that's one of the opportunities that we're pursuing. Secondly, institutions have generally avoided these tertiary markets that they deem tertiary, and we don't deem North Carolina, Texas, Colorado, Michigan, Ohio. We don't deem those markets as tertiary markets. We deem those markets as wonderful markets where job growth is plentiful, where population growth is pursuing, and where there's families that need places to afford. Number 3, I've touched on this a couple of times, but institutions have generally avoided investing in this space because of a high percentage of park-owned homes. And when there's a high percentage of park-owned homes, historically, lenders have not been able to provide capital and leverage that makes the returns juicy enough. And even insurance companies have frowned on that. We think that that's changing. And again, I encourage you to pay attention to the news flow around the manufactured housing segment coming out of the government and the lending agencies over the coming weeks and months ahead. This is going to change. In conclusion, again, at the end of the day, real estate's real estate, investment is an investment, but we really believe that if you can focus on empowering and identifying leaders who, in our case, are those community managers who are providing a service to those residents, we think great things can happen. And we're going to continue to focus and really be maniacally focused on trying to train them and teach them and give them all the resources they need to help us fill this great cause. And with that, that's the conclusion of my prepared remarks. I'm happy to take other questions. Okay, great.
Thanks, Matt, for a wonderful presentation. Very interesting, very intriguing. We'll all go out and invest in this space. Okay, there's an update on the key fob. We've actually, because of the demand, we've hidden it in the front 9. So whoever wants to participate and getting a new Mercedes, just help yourself out there. Thanks for coming, turn in your CPE card. We will see you in October. Have a good evening.